The night sky used to have so many stars that ancient humans thought the darkness was the weird part. Not the stars. The darkness between them. You are Grug. You have never seen a city. You have never seen a streetlight. You have never even seen a candle that was not on fire because your cousin touched it. And your world looks absolutely nothing like the one outside your window right now. So why did everything look so different? And why, once you find out, will you feel slightly cheated by your own century? Let us start with the sky. Modern humans look up at night and see maybe 2,000 stars if they drive really far from the city and squint. Grug looked up and saw somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 stars with his bare eyeballs. Every single night. No exceptions. There was no light pollution because there was no light. There was no electricity. There was no city. There was just Grug, lying on the ground, staring at what looked like someone spilled a bowl of glowing rice across the entire ceiling of the universe. The Milky Way was not a fuzzy concept to ancient humans. It was a road. It was so bright and so dense with stars that many early cultures genuinely used it for navigation the way we use GPS. Except it never said recalculating. And it never sent you into a lake. Grug, look up. Sky full of light. Grug not impressed. Grug thinks this is normal. Grug is correct. But the sky was just the beginning. Because if Grug looked down from that sky and across the landscape, what he saw was even more unhinged. There were mammoths. Not fossils. Not museum bones. Not that one CGI documentary Grug definitely did not watch. Actual living woolly mammoths, standing in herds, breathing, making mammoth noises, being enormous. The average woolly mammoth was about 11 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed somewhere around 6 tons. That is heavier than most of the vehicles on your street right now. And there were thousands of them. Roaming. Just out there. Living their big fluffy lives. And here is the crazy part. Mammoths were not even the weird ones. Ancient humans also shared their world with giant ground sloths the size of elephants. Cave lions that were 30% bigger than modern lions. Short-faced bears that stood 13 feet tall when upright and could run 30 miles per hour. Irish elk with antlers spanning 12 feet wide. 12 feet. That is wider than most apartments. This thing would not fit through your front door. Not even sideways. Grug see giant elk. Giant elk does not fit in cave. Grug's cave is basically a studio. Everyone is stressed. This is the part of the video where we pause to appreciate that Grug was essentially doing his grocery shopping inside a nature documentary that had not decided whether it was a nature documentary or a horror film yet. And it gets worse. Or better. Depending on your feelings about giant animals. There was also megalodon in the oceans until relatively recently in geological terms. There were giant hyenas. There were terror birds in South America, flightless predatory birds standing 10 feet tall that chased things down on foot. Ancient humans in parts of the world were not at the top of the food chain. They were in a negotiation. Every single day was a negotiation. But here is the thing that flips your brain over. Ancient humans were not cowering. The fossil and archaeological record shows that early Homo sapiens and even Neanderthals were actively hunting these giant animals. On purpose. With spears they made themselves. They looked at a woolly mammoth, which again weighs 6 tons, and thought, yeah, we got this. Together. Grug see mammoth. Mammoth very large. Grug and 7 friends with pointy sticks have a plan. Plan is optimistic. Plan is mostly vibes. And the mammoth hunts worked often enough that large game was a genuine staple of the Paleolithic diet. There is evidence of systematic mammoth butchering sites. There is a site in the Czech Republic where researchers found the bones of 1,000 mammoths in one location. 1,000. That is not a hunting trip. That is a lifestyle. Grug's still mad about the mammoth. We will come back to that. Now, let us talk about the ice. Because here is something that sounds made up but is extremely real. At the peak of the last glacial maximum, roughly 20,000 years ago, ice sheets covered roughly 30% of the entire land surface of the Earth. 30%. An ice sheet up to 2 miles thick sat on top of what is now Chicago. 2 miles of ice on top of the city that has good pizza. The ice did not care about the pizza. The ice was not sorry. Much of Britain was under a glacier. Northern Europe was a frozen tundra that stretched into what is now the middle of France. Sea levels were roughly 400 feet lower than they are today because so much water was locked up in ice. Which means coastlines looked completely different. The English Channel did not exist. You could walk from Britain to France. You could walk from Asia to North America across a land bridge that is now underwater. People did walk that way. That is how humans got to the Americas. They walked. Grug not by plane ticket. Grug walked to new continent. Grug not think this is remarkable. It is extremely remarkable. And because so much land was exposed that is now underwater, and because ice sheets were reshaping entire continents, the visual experience of the world was just categorically different. Mountains that now sit inland used to have glaciers on them. Rivers ran in completely different directions. Ecosystems that no longer exist anywhere on Earth were thriving ecosystems that ancient humans lived inside every day. Here is the forest part. In the parts of the world that were not under ice, particularly in the northern hemisphere after the last glacial maximum began retreating around 15,000 years ago, forests grew back with a density that modern humans have basically never experienced. Ancient temperate forests, the kind that covered Europe and large parts of North America, were so thick and so continuous that you could genuinely walk for weeks without leaving tree cover. Not a park. Not a state forest with trails and signs telling you about the ecosystem. An actual unbroken canopy of old-growth trees where the oldest trees were hundreds of years old and the undergrowth was so dense it filtered the light to near darkness at noon. It was not quiet either. These forests were full of things. Animals. Birds. Insects. Movement. At night the sounds coming out of old-growth forest are so layered and constant that first-time campers in preserved ancient forests today describe it as overwhelming. Grug live in forest. Forest loud. Forest dark. Forest has opinions. Grug respects the forest. Grug does not have a choice. But here is what really lands when you sit with this. Grug was not experiencing any of this as remarkable. This is just Tuesday. The 10,000 stars are Tuesday. The mammoth herd is Tuesday. The 2-mile ice sheet to the north is just weather. Grug's normal was so far outside anything modern humans have experienced that if you dropped a Paleolithic hunter-gatherer into your life today, they would find everything about it absolutely baffling, and if you dropped yourself into Grug's life, you would find everything about it absolutely impossible. The average ancient human in a hunter-gatherer group walks somewhere between 10 miles and 20 miles per day. Not for exercise. Not to hit a step goal. To survive. They had no choice. Food did not come to them. Food was out there, in the forest with opinions, and they had to go get it. And when they got it, they had to carry it back. In the dark. With the cave lion sounds. Modern humans invented the gym because we stopped doing that. Grug did not need a gym. Grug needed a nap. And the social situation was its own thing. Ancient hunter-gatherer bands were typically between 20 and 150 people, a range that anthropologists call Dunbar's number territory, roughly the maximum number of stable relationships a human brain can maintain. So Grug knew everyone. Grug was related to many of them. Grug could not escape any of them. There was no moving to a different city. There was no blocking someone. If you had a bad breakup in Grug's group, you saw that person at the mammoth hunt. Every time. Forever. This was the original situationship. And it had consequences. For the mammoth. Grug's still mad about the mammoth, by the way. Because the woolly mammoth went extinct roughly 4,000 years ago. The last population survived on Wrangel Island in the Arctic until around 1650 BCE, which is well into recorded human history. The Egyptian pyramids were already standing. And somewhere, on a small island in the Arctic, the last mammoths were still walking around not knowing the news. That is genuinely one of the most melancholy facts in all of natural history and also somehow very funny. The mammoths outlasted their own extinction announcement by 3,000 years. Grug is sad about the mammoth. Grug did not personally do it. Grug blames the guys with the optimistic spear plan. Grug was a vegetarian for a week after he found out. Then he found out vegetables also have a complicated history. Grug gave up. Here is the real payoff. Everything you find normal about the world, the dark sky at night, the relatively empty landscape, the absence of giant animals making decisions about your afternoon, all of it is the exception. For 99% of human history, the world was bigger, louder, brighter at night, colder in some places, more alive with creatures that could absolutely end you, and more continuous in its wildness than anything most modern humans will ever experience. Grug's world was not weird. Grug's world was the original. Our world is the experiment. And honestly, Grug would probably look at a grocery store and feel the same low-level existential dread you feel looking at a field of megafauna. Just an entire room full of things that should not exist. Organized in rows. Glowing with cold light. No mammoths anywhere. Grug not sure which is scarier. If you made it this far, you have the brain of a hunter-gatherer, which is a compliment, because those people were navigating by 10,000 stars and planning mammoth hunts, and they figured it out. Hit subscribe so Grug can explain more things. Grug has opinions about a lot of things. And Grug is still mad about the mammoth.